Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Alan Law, and for tonight, I'm the chairman of the District Planning Committee. Welcome to this evening's meeting. Other members of the committee in attendance are, let's read them out, Councillors Phil Barnett, Jeff Beck, Hilary Cole, Caroline Culver, Clive Hooker, Royce Longton, Ross McKinnon, Alan McCrow, Graham Pask, and Tony Vickers. The following officers are also in attendance to advise and support and help in the meeting. We've got Simon Till, who's the team leader of the Western Area Planning Committee, Sharon Armour, who's our legal support solicitor, and Jenny Legg, who's strategic support and is clerking the meeting for tonight. We're also assisted by Kevin Griffin, who will be the Zoom host of the meeting. Now, for the benefit of those watching online, let me explain what District Planning Committee is and why we're here this evening. West Berkshire Council has two area planning committees, the East and the West. But we have one set of policies across both areas, which in most instances are applied equally across all applications. However, there are odd occasions, perhaps 2 or 3 times a year, when officers conclude that one of the committees has perhaps not applied policy properly, and there has been no exceptional circumstances made to justify the policy decision. So to ensure equanimity of policy across the district, the application, as tonight, is referred for further consideration to this district committee. One important point, this application tonight is a whole new application. Whilst it may look like it is not a rerun of either of the 2 Western Area Planning Committee meetings, there may well be new or amended evidence, and all members, no matter how they voted last time, if they were on Western Area, they must approach tonight's meeting with an open mind. So having said that, I will now briefly outline the approach for the application and how it's going to work. Again, for those of you who perhaps are watching us for the first time, members, bear with me as you know this all backwards. The officers will present the application to committee. The drawings, site plans, and any deemed relevant materials submitted on the planning file will be shown as part of that presentation. I will then invite the clerk to read out the 500-word submissions, and these will be shown on the screen for clarity from the following groups and in this order: Parish Council, objectors, supporters, and from the applicant agent. On conclusion of each of those possible 4 500-word submissions, I will ask members if they have any questions of clarification on that particular submission or on the individual words, 500-word submissions, of which members of the committee have received copies and will have read. If they have questions, the attendees will be invited into the meeting to answer those questions. If they do not have any questions, the attendees will not be invited into the meeting. On conclusion of answering any questions, the attendees will be invited back to the waiting room. I will then invite the ward member, or in this case, the ward members, to speak, and they will have 5 minutes in total to present their case. Members then may, on conclusion of their presentation, also ask questions of clarification of the ward members. The committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification from the officers, and the committee will then decide the application through debate and vote on the decision. Now, I will now ask the meeting clerk, Jenny Legg, to give some reminders to members and other attendees about how we conduct council meetings at the moment via Zoom. Jenny.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share the slide for you. Hope everyone can see that. So the standard Zoom reminders are on screen. In addition to these points, if it becomes necessary for any members to telephone into the meeting, they won't be able to signal to speak. Therefore, once everyone has raised the Zoom hand as spoken, I will ask the chairman to invite anyone who has joined by telephone to speak in order. Voting on the planning applications will take place via a named vote. Members will be asked in turn by the legal advisor how they wish to vote by stating they are for or against the proposal. If they wish to abstain, please remember to unmute yourself when voting. Any other votes will be conducted via a show of actual hands during the meeting. Unless the committee asks for the vote to be recorded, the outcome of the named vote will not appear in the minutes, so anyone wishing their vote to be recorded must indicate this before the vote is taken. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will adjourn and advise the committee of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it's a short adjournment, you'll be able to rejoin the Zoom meeting, otherwise a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed?
Could you go to full screen, please, Jenny?
Yeah, sorry. Everyone happy?
No, I'm still seeing shared screen.
Oh, sorry.
Ah, that's better. Thank you. I take it there were no questions on the administrivia. Okay, fine, thank you. Now I'd like to move on to the meeting as such and go into item number 1, which is apologies. Jenny, do we have any apologies?
We do. We have an apology from Councillor Bennyworth, and Councillor Beck will be acting as his substitute.
Thank you very much. Now, members, minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments? I have one, but has anyone else got anything? Just wave your hand if you feel you have. Okay, let me go on to my comment, which was near the end on page 15 about the vote. My version says the vote, the motion was carried by 9 votes in favour of the officer's recommendation for refusal and 3 against. As there are only 11 of us, that was an impossibility. So it's been amended to 9 voting for and 2 voting against. Apart from that change, is there anything else members wish to on the? If not, could I have a proposer to accept those minutes, please?
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
And to second, please. Okay, I've got so proposed by Councillor Paskin, seconded by Councillor Hilary Cole. Thank you very much. Now, interest.
Sorry, can I just check everyone's in agreement with minutes? Sorry.
Oh yes, thank you very much for keeping me on the straight and narrow, Sharon. Thank you. Okay. Declarations of interest. Have anyone any declarations of interest related to tonight's meeting? Jeff Beck, Councillor Beck.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just, with regard to the minutes of the last meeting, I have to abstain on that because I was not present.
That's fine. Okay, but that's not a declaration of interest. Okay, fine. So let me go. Are there any declarations of interest relating to tonight's meeting? No, I don't see any. Okay, so I'd like to move therefore towards item 4, which is the application that we're going to be hearing tonight for Quill Cottage, Craven Road, Inkpen. Simon Till will introduce the report, but just before he does, I wish to clarify an important point. I noted in the minutes of the 2 Western Area planning meetings, and particularly the first one, but it was also to some extent in the October meeting, the second one, there was considerable debate around the sizing and measurements with the applicant agent and others querying the officer's presentation. As a result of that, for this meeting, a new officer has looked at the drawings and submitted, these are published at paragraph 2.7 on page 20. Now, I note there have been no submissions made by either the agent or the applicant to challenge these measurements. Therefore, I intend to take and I would direct you to take these measurements as the definitive measurements upon which we will decide the application this evening. I will not allow any further debate on this point. Having said that, Simon, would you please introduce the application?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'll just share my screen. Can I confirm that members can see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Members, this application is for a replacement dwelling. It was considered by the Western Area Planning Committee on the 14th of October last year, following a previous deferral in July due to the measurements issue that Council Law has referred to. It was brought before the Western Area Planning Committee by ward members call-in to clarify the interpretation of policy C7 of the Housing Site Allocation Development Plan document. The committee's recommendation was that the application be granted conditional approval, and a list of recommended conditions is appended to your agenda. It's been brought to District Planning Committee due to concerns that its approval would represent a significant deviation from policy, namely policy C7 of the Housing Site Allocations DPD, which sets out the criteria for considering applications for replacement dwellings in the countryside. 8 letters of support are recorded, 7 received since the meeting of the WAPC. The application site is located in Inkpen alongside Craven Road. It's an area with the outer settlement boundary considered to be countryside under the policy and is within the North Essex Downs AONB. The existing dwellings are bungalow that, while rather modest in appearance, provides 4 bedrooms and a reasonable amount of accommodation for a 4-bedroom dwelling, as the case officer has referred to in the reports to the WAPC. The boundary consists of a 2-metre hedge alongside Craven Road and a mature vegetation confined by a 1.8-metre close bordered fence to the southeast. A public right-of-way exits the site onto Craven Road directly opposite the site to the southwest, and to the southeast, another public right-of-way runs alongside the boundary. The proposed works include the demolition of the existing dwelling and the detached garage and the erection of a 2-storey 4-bedroom dwelling. This would be accompanied by the erection of a 2-metre wall to the side in the location of the existing garage. Members, the recommendation of refusal is on 2 grounds. As there are no objections to the proposed works in the respect of other matters, I shall focus on reasons for refusal and comment on each of these in turn. However, first, I should note that there are no highways objections on either access or parking provision, and although a report submitted with the application notes the presence of bats, the ecologist has recommended this be addressed by way of conditions. Turning to the reasons for refusal, the first relates to proportionality, and I would like at this point to draw your attention to the table at point 2.7 of the report on page 20 of the agenda, which sets out what officers agree is the correct set of calculations for floor area and height of the existing and proposed dwellings. Those are similar to those reported to the Western Area Planning Committee on the 14th of October, but have now been reviewed by a senior planning officer and checked by myself. This sets out that the proposed dwelling would represent an increase in floor area of approximately 110% and an increase in height of approximately 49%. However, I would also like to draw your attention to the inspector's comments on the recent Inglewood Cottage decision at part 2.4 of the report. These set out that policy C7 doesn't provide a definition nor a metric in which proportionality is measured, and that its key components are in fact scale, massing, height, and layout. The test of whether something is disproportionate is a visual and qualitative test. The scale, bulk, mass, and height of proposed works, and crucially, how much more prominent those would make the proposed dwelling in views from the public realm, are a key consideration. As the inspectors noted, it's a matter of the impact of a particular property in a particular location, and the degree of harm is a matter of planning judgment based on the site specifics. In this case, your officers consider that there are 2 crucial elements. The first of these is the height of the proposals. These would take the height of the dwelling well beyond the level where it would benefit from the screening and softening offered from the hedge alongside Craven Road, an impact that's compounded by its location opposite the junction of a public right-of-way and the highway, and its position within a subtle bend in the road where the current dwelling sits very unobtrusively. The second element is the combination of the design and massing. The dual gable design with the limited setback, large prominent uniform windows at first floor, height and long roof slopes with side dormers would all lead to a significant massing of development at first floor level, which would be totally at odds with the low-key appearance of the existing dwelling in the street scene. The existing dwelling is quite unobtrusive within the street scene, and this is a result of its low roof form and considerable setback, elements which serve to assist in blending with the pattern of the street scene rather than standing proud from it. Dwelling is all that is available to view from the public right-of-way opposite and slopes away from Craven Road, limiting its impact. The proposed dwelling would impose two wide and prominent gables that are 2.6 metres higher than the ridge of the existing dwelling at the same proximity to the road as the much lower eaves of the existing dwelling. It is therefore your officer's view that the proposed dwelling is, in terms of scale, bulk, height and massing, disproportionate in its level of impact to the existing dwelling. And that view there, members, to be clear, is the view from the end of the public right-of-way which exits through that gate. The result would be an imposing structure that would be prominent within the street scene in a manner that the existing dwelling is not, and therefore contrary to the requirements of policy C7 of the DPD. Turning to the second reason for refusal, which focuses on the design of the proposed works, officers have carefully assessed both the street scene and the component parts of the design. Many of my comments in relation to the issue of proportionality relate to the design. The surrounding street scene exhibits a relatively varied pattern of designs with a mixture of traditional materials and house building. The majority of these designs are either simple rural cottages or larger dwellings that display a mixture of materials, including brick, painted brick, and render to contribute detail. The WAPC had some concern that there were examples of dwellings of flint construction in the area. There is one dwelling, home cottage, approximately 50 metres northwest of the site, that has a mixture of brick and flint at ground floor level and render at first floor level. But this is a very different design to the proposed dwelling at Quill Cottage. The proposed replacement dwelling, particularly by virtue of its prominent front gables, large symmetrical pattern of windows, and collection of dormers, has a particularly bulky and suburban appearance that is not typical of the majority of dwellings in this part of the street scene, where the built form is stepping down to a transition into the backdrop of countryside surrounding the site. The choice of large expanses of flint as a fascia material would be uncharacteristic of this part of the street scene and would compound the impact of the dwelling by emphasising the visual bulk of the two front gables, which would appear prominent in views approaching along Craven Road from the north and the public right-of-way opposite to the southwest. Officers also have concerns about the visual impact of the southern side elevation on views from the public right-of-way to the southeast should the boundary vegetation be thinned or removed due to its considerable bulk and depth in the winter months when the vegetation to the front and sides loses its leaves. Members, I'd also like to draw your attention to the Parish Council's objection, which is reported on page 29 of your agenda. This raises concerns with the loss of openness of views and the scale and mass of the proposed dwelling and its proximity to and impact on the visual amenity of the public right-of-way. The parish's comments note several points of the village design statement that the application fails to address. Most notably that it states that suburbanisation should be resisted, that the stock of smaller houses is under pressure through their replacement with larger dwellings, and the planning guidelines that materials should be chosen to respect the style, colours and textures of neighbouring buildings within the local context. And that the new and extended external walls should relate to the materials of the existing surrounding buildings. These were set out in the update sheet for the Western Area Planning Committee meeting of the 14th of October 2020. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to the update sheet for this meeting, which draws attention to two matters. The first being a typo in one line of the refusal reasons, and the second, an error in the red line shown on the location plan, which omits part of what the council's records indicate is the established residential curtilage of the site. Members, in respect of this matter, the location plan, your officers your officers recommend that if you're minded to approve, the resolution includes an informative to address this matter, referring to the plan that I'm displaying on the screen there, which is the council's record of the correct residential curtilage of the site. In conclusion, then, your officer's recommendation is that this application should be refused for the reasons set out in the report to the Western Area Planning Committee dated 14th of October 2020 and as amended by the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Go back to full screen. Thanks. We're now there. We now go on to the written submissions. We have no submission from the parish council, none from an adjoining parish council. So the first one we have is from an objector, a Mr. James Puxley. Jenny, would you care to read Mr. Puxley's statement, please?
Yes, Chairman, I shall just share my screen. So this is, as you say, the objector. Is that big enough for everybody? Can you see?
Oh, that's fine now. Yep.
So it's redacted at the beginning. So CPR, the Countryside Charity, wish to endorse and support the Planning Officer's report of the above planning application to refuse permission on the basis that it does not comply with local and national planning policy. The planning application has been given full and lengthy discussion at the two previous meetings of the Western Area Planning Committee, which has focused almost entirely on the measurements of and calculations of the proposed dwelling, without due consideration given to the environmental impact and character of this rural village or the openness of the AONB countryside. This proposal has not taken into account the character and setting within the wider landscape. Its design is independent of its setting, does not make a positive contribution to the street scene, but rather detracts from its setting by its prominence in design, height and scale. Reference WBT policy C7HAS. The proposed new dwelling will replace a modest form of dwelling with a far more visibly prominent and intrusive dwelling. The height, scale, massing and design would erode away the local distinctiveness and openness of the rural landscape. Of major concern is the unacceptable level of light emanating from the large windows which will light up the dark sky area at night in the AONB. Current garden screening will not diffuse the impact due to the increased height of the proposed roofline with no guarantee of permanence. Inkpen was traditionally a collection of small hamlets which have been joined together in open countryside, which has subsequently attracted many new residents in recent years due to its unique landscape position, some of which seek to demolish or enlarge properties disproportionately and replace with structures which do not reflect the surrounding area. West Berkshire HSA policy C7 4.57 refers, reference the village design statement adopted by WBC. The rural character of the village is greatly valued, with the attention drawn to the importance of open spaces, the sense of remoteness and darkness of the night sky. The low density of development and the road network gives the village a rural character. Fields, woodlands, hedges, walls and green spaces are critically important to the village. Existing planning policy and the NPPF gives great weight to conserving and enhancing the AONB, its beauty and visual quality of the landscape and amenity of the area. The Inkpen countryside provides much openness for the general well-being of visitors, ramblers and tourists to the 13th century church, the Crocus Field and Common Land, the last two owned and maintained by Beebout. It is hoped that following discussion, the District Planning Committee will consider the above and refuse this application. The end of the submission.
Thank you, Jenny. Kevin, is Mr. Puxley available to come in from the waiting room if members have questions?
No, he's not present this evening, Chairman.
He is not present. So irrespective of members were not able to question Mr. Pixley. Could I therefore then go on to the supporters? We've got a Mr. Roger Hunt and a Ms. Claire Jones. Go ahead, please.
Share the screen.
Yes, Jenny.
One moment. So this is, because there were two supporters, officers have summarised their submission. The houses on Craven Road are a mix of styles. The proposed new house will have a beneficial impact on the setting, character and appearance of the site. The proposed replacement building will significantly enhance the street scene when compared to the existing building. The proposed brick and flint construction has been used elsewhere in the village, most recently Lower Inkpen House, which mirrors the older cottages next door. It is a style common throughout the region. It will give a feel in keeping with the AONB and will improve the look of the area when compared with the existing bungalow. With modern insulation, the building will be more environmentally friendly than the existing building. There are also examples of the use of dormer windows in the immediate vicinity: Vale Farm, the Swan Public House, Macefield House and Holly Tree Cottage. Summary points. No objections filed on West Berkshire Planning website. Immediate neighbours and Craven Road residents do not object to this application. Inkpen Parish Council support by a majority. This is not a development, this is a family who contribute considerably to this community and want to have a family home in a village they want to live in. There will be minimal impact on the open space, countryside and footpaths concerned. The impact of this proposed house will be minimal. The houses either side have a far greater impact on the OAMB and open space views from the footpath behind Quill Cottage than this house will. The neighbours and those residents who I've spoken to feel that this will be an improvement on the current bungalow. There are dormer windows all along Craven Road. Vale Farm, next door to Quills, is surrounded by dormer windows. The design is taking into consideration the Inkpen design statement and is consistent with other houses built recently in Inkpen and the surrounding villages. If the planning department do not agree with the materials being proposed, the family are prepared to work with them to make changes to the exterior. It's very unlikely that whomever owns this bungalow and plot would keep this run-down, unattractive 70s bungalow, hence the support for this application, which is sympathetic to its surroundings, its neighbours, and the village as a whole. Better to support a planning application which has the support of its community than to be faced in the future by a development which is not and will no doubt push the planning department to its limit.
Thank you very much. Can you tell me, is Mr. Hunt and Ms. Jones available?
Yes, they are, Chairman.
Okay, let me just see. Members, if you wish to ask a question of either of them, could you indicate by your blue hand, please? Yes, I do have questions. So could we possibly, Kevin, could we bring both the supporters into the meeting, please?
Just bring them in now, Chairman. I can't see them, but I think they just need to start their cameras. They should be in the meeting now.
Can they hear us, do you think?
I can hear you.
Fine. Just bear with me a moment. I've got councillors Pask, Vickers, Macro, Hooker and McKinnon wish to ask questions. So I will take them in that order. So I can see both and Mr. Hunt. Councillor Pask, would you please ask the first question, and will you say which particular supporter you wish to ask the question to?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually unsure, as the as our officers have paraphrased, I think, and combined two sets. So perhaps the relevant, I'm assuming either Ms. Jones or Mr. Hunt was one of those who stated that Inkpen Parish Council support this application by a majority.
That was Ms. Jones.
Page 29 on our planning agenda, which says Inkpen Parish Council object with 5 reasons. Forgive me, but I'm confused.
I can explain. So the objection that was put in June was a result not of a meeting, but of an email that was sent out as an emergency. I've asked to see the results of that because I didn't understand the wording of the objection, saying that this impacted on the paddock, which it didn't. And there were various other things within that objection that were not necessarily, I thought, in line with what if someone had visited the site or had seen the plans. And so I wanted to understand where that objection came from. There are, you'll notice that on the West Berkshire planning site, there are 4 parish councillors who are supporting these plans. And the email that was sent out in June, as I said, is not part of a meeting. So there is a question as to how those emails came about. I've asked to see the emails that made up that objection, and I haven't been given those. I am the vice chair of the parish council. So that currently there are 4 supporters. There are 7 parish councillors with an ink pen, 4 of which support this planning application.
Councillor Pass, do you wish to come back on that?
Well, no, I accept the answer given. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for the clarification.
Can I just ask a question because related to the same thing? Because I'm confused because the official position for the parish council as presented in these papers and in fact as presented on the ink pen website, parish council website, because I was confused this morning. I went onto that website and I noticed that there's nothing at all about a June meeting.
No, there was no June meeting. Sorry.
Excuse me. There's nothing at all about a June meeting or minutes or an agenda. The parish council did have a meeting in February, and which I saw that you declared a personal interest and didn't vote. There has been no other meeting recorded which says we have changed our mind. So I'm confused about the whole thing.
The reason I declared a personal interest was because I was told if I knew somebody, then I had to declare a personal interest. I know everybody on Craven Road, so I'm slightly, I was misled, if I'm honest about that. I know everybody. I've been in this on Craven Road for 20 years. And so I was told I had to declare an interest because I knew the Jones family. I'm not related to them. I don't mix with them socially. I know, as I say, I know everybody on Craven Road. And that's why I said that I had to declare an interest.
But there's no known date for a meeting of the parish council to change their opinion.
No, because it was a result of an email that was sent out by the parish clerk, which said this was an emergency. And I've asked to see the responses. She says that there were 3 responses, and yet there was one that was sent from Miss Jenny Edwards that said that she supported it, and the other 2.
Can I just say this is kind of not actually terribly relevant?
No, it's not. I agree, it's not relevant.
Yes, we've got to, as a committee, we've got to judge what's in front of us tonight. And
yeah, I agree.
Okay, fine. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, I've now gone on to Councillor Vickers. Councillor Vickers, do you have any questions?
Yes, question again for Miss Jones. You say in your statements that it's very unlikely that whoever owns the bungalow would keep it, this rundown, unattractive bungalow, etc., etc. What evidence do you have? I mean, have you seen similar situations where properties like this have been put up for sale and nobody's been prepared to buy them in your village?
There's if I give an example, there's a bungalow on Pottery Lane, which is for sale at the moment, which is £725,000. It has a much smaller garden, and I can't see that anybody would buy this bungalow if the Joneses decide to sell it for in excess of £700,000 and live in that bungalow, because it's not. It's when the planning office said that there were 4 bedrooms. They are tiny bedrooms. Well, to be honest, I haven't been in them, but the whole property is tiny. So you can say that, yes, but I can't imagine that anybody would buy a bungalow for 700,000+ and live in it when it's run down and not suitable for a family, I would argue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCrow.
My question was regarding the parish council objection and this statement that parish councillors are in favour. So my question's been asked.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, you will correct me. I think in your opening statement, we're also able to ask questions of Ms Jones's submission, although it's been preceded with the other gentleman. And
Yes, of course.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions on there. And Mrs Jones, thank you for your submission. I think you've cleared up my concern with regards to your third bullet point, which Inkpen Parish Council support by majority. You've covered that. That wasn't a meeting. It wasn't a parish council meeting. It was an email and what have you. But there you go on the impact. And I am right in saying I asked this question because you put yourself as Claire Jones, Inkpen Parish Councillor. And you sign yourself as Claire Jones, Inkpen Parish Councillor. And with interest, as the chairman has mentioned, I went on the website and sure enough, you did have a planning subcommittee meeting on the 5th of February, where you all discussed this. And I note that you are a member of that planning committee. Am I right?
Well, I'm a parish councillor, so yes, I'm automatically, there are 7 parish councillors. And in February, yes, we did discuss it, but that was the original plans with the big garage. And as I pointed out earlier on, I was told that because I knew the Joneses, I wasn't allowed to I had to declare an interest.
Okay. But what I was going to say with, on your first bullet point, you say that there will be minimum impact on the open space, countryside and footpaths concerned. You also say, I can assure the committee that the impact of this proposed house will be minimal. And further down on an impact there, on a further bullet point, you say the Inkpen design statement, it takes into consideration the Inkpen design statement. But in there, it does in fact have reference to the dark skies policy, of which something this committee will be considering that this house may well breach. But if I go back to the minutes of which you were a part of and the objection that you sent in to the council.
No, hang on. Can I just check? You are referring to the meeting in February.
I appreciate it was the previous application, and this is the one in February, but not dissimilar because we're looking at proportionality, size.
Well, can I just
excuse me? Let me just rule on this. We only ever have had one submission officially from Inkpen Parish Council. And I think that's the one Councillor Hooker is referring to. Councillor Hooker?
Thank you. And in there, it does say the impact, your objections to that was, where it is recorded, the objection is due to the dwelling disproportionate to the original and the volume is more than double the size of the original. You then go on to say the impact on the highway and the adjacent footpath, 15 and 16, will be significant and are well used by ramblers. The openness of the current site will be destroyed, protection of the amenity of the AONB, and also you say the external lighting is a problem to protect dark skies. Now, you've supported it in your submission, and yet you're a member of that committee of which had made those objections. I just wonder if you have changed your mind.
So the objection that I've got in front of me is one that was made in June on the current plans. The one you're referring to in the meeting was in February, where the plans were withdrawn. So I'm not quite sure, because the one I've got in front of me is the submission for the objection from the parish council that was sent by Gloria Keane on the 3rd of June 2020. And that's to do with this current plan. The one you're referring to is one in February where the proposals were withdrawn. So I'm confused as to why the council is saying that you only have had one, because
can I just clarify? You're saying that the parish council submitted to the council, to the planning officers, a different parish council recommendation in June.
So I've got in front of me, and which I got.
No, that's just it's a yes or no answer.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, yes.
So okay, that is something I will go back to Councillor Hooker with the officers when we get there to check with the officers.
I can confirm that, Chairman. It is an application. It is an application that was withdrawn. But my comments are certainly with regard to the effect of lighting, with respect to the aspect of the property from the footpath, although it's a different application, it's the same issues of which the Mrs. Jones has changed her opinion.
Yes,
I
yes.
appreciate
On
the
a point of order,
withdrawal.
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to take into account the minutes of a meeting of a previous meeting about a different application which were not in our papers?
That's a debate that's a point I need to get clarified with the officers, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you.
Because if looking at what's in front of us tonight, the officers have said the parish council have objected. So I'm assuming that objection is pertinent to this particular application. I'm assuming that, but I will ask the officers to clarify that.
I think in the case of the supporters that we're asking questions of now, Mrs. Jones is obviously a supporter rather than the parish council, and I think she said what she knows about what happened at the parish. So maybe that's a question for officers, and maybe we can direct the questions to Mrs. Jones about her views on the planning merits.
I agree. Thank you for that. Thank you for that guidance.
Thank you, Chairman. No more questions.
Okay. Councillor McKinnon.
That's all right, Chairman. My question's already been asked and answered.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So can we now move on to the submission by the Mr. Ashley Jones, the applicant, please?
Chairman, I've got a question.
I'm sorry, Phil, I didn't see your hand up.
No, that's all right. Sorry, Chairman. I was a bit late coming in, and I think the issue is actually sort of confusing me a little bit.
And I've also got, can I just say before you go, I've also got Councillor Hilary Cole as well now.
Right. Okay, Chairman, if I can ask for you, I'm asking you, Miss Jones, as a supporter, and I'm trying to get some clarification. My impression was that the general supportive view is it's an enhancement in the street scene of a proposed building. And the issue that I really wanted to address with you is to ask you the question. It's been stated that the type of building that's being proposed is looking more of a suburban type than a rural type building. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, for those people who have been to Craven Road, I
have as well.
Yeah, there are many houses that could be argued as suburban, and houses that have been recently built that are probably way out of character for a country cottage. You know, I live in a country thatched cottage, but there are many houses on Craven Road that are much larger and much more modern than this planned application. And so from what I understand from the Joneses and from their neighbours, hedges have been discussed, planting's been discussed, and I know the Joneses have already started planting trees. I walk on that footpath every day, just about. So I hope I've answered your question, but I think that Craven Road has a mixture of very modern houses and old cottages. It's a real eclectic mix of houses along Craven Road.
Thank you. I think you've made that clear. Councillor Cole, Hilary Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to sort of alleviate any confusion with regard to the Parish Council's comments, I have got the Parish Council's comments up on the portal dated the 3rd of June, and those are exactly the same as are on page 29 of the agenda, Chairman, if that
clarifies it. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, right, now can we move on then to read out the submission of the applicant, please, Jenny?
Certainly, Chairman, just share my screen. So to say this is the applicant.
And let me, I didn't have the courtesy of thanking Ms. Jones and Mr. Hunt. Thank you for attending.
So carry on?
Yeah, yes, please, yeah.
Quill Cottage is a drab old 70s bungalow with no architectural merit. It is damp in areas and heated from an oil tank. The hedges are thin and the boundary in poor shape. We've lived here for a few years, but before that, the property was rented. What we propose is a vast improvement, a 2-storey house on the same footprint, effectively adding another story on the bungalow. We're proposing a 100% increase in usable space, but a far more modest increase in volume. We've been clever with the design, building into the eaves to keep the height at a sensible level, only an additional 50% and lower than the neighbours. We're sensitive to the local area, so the village design statement was at the heart of our plans, and the materials we have chosen are of the best quality. We've also submitted a sustainability statement to demonstrate our focus on the environment. It's important to us that we reduce our impact on the environment. Our energy performance certificate generated shows the dwelling as an energy efficient rating of 57, band D, and the environmental impact CO2 rating of 53, band E. It's intended that the proposed dwelling will not only meet current building regulations, but will surpass them by providing a minimum of 20% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions over current requirements. It is expected that the overall emissions for the new dwelling will be lower than the existing dwelling, despite the increase in floor area. Where possible, materials will be sourced locally, but priority given to sourcing materials that have the highest rating in the BRE Green Guide to Specification. In the front hedge and at the back of the paddock, we have planted a number of new native hedge whips. We will continue this around the entire boundary. We have a countryside stewardship scheme capital grant for hedge work, and have engaged a local hedging contractor who uses traditional methods of hedge management. The aim being to have a continuous thick hedge of native species. The majority of the Parish Council and the Western Area Planning Committee are both in favour of the application. So too are our neighbours, those who live along Craven Road and others who regularly use the footpath. We have had many letters of support, some of which are on the planning portal website. We have had no objections. We've engaged with our immediate neighbours who have asked that we fill in the hedge where it has become thin, something we have already started. We have received no other comments. Throughout this long application, almost 12 months now, we've been receptive to and actively sought dialogue with the planning office, but sadly none has been forthcoming.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Is Mr. Jones in the waiting room?
Yes, he is, Chairman.
Let me just check. Do we have any blue hands wishing to question? Yes, we do. Okay, could you bring Mr. Jones in, please, Kevin?
He should have joined us. He just needs to start his camera.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Jones. Could you just unmute yourself, please?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending this evening. I have a question from Councillor Vickers. Tony, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, hello, Mr. Jones, and you can confirm that you're no relation of the Miss Jones we've just been hearing from, but that was not my question. I'm sure that's true if she says so. My question is about the last sentence in your statement where you say you've actively sought dialogue with the planning office, because elsewhere in their papers, in their report, I think it said somewhere that they'd asked to contact you and you'd not been forthcoming. So could you clarify what the sort of engagement is between yourselves and our officers?
Can I just interject? I don't think this is actually relevant to our determination of what's in front of us tonight. There may or may not have been proper dialogue, but that is not the subject of this meeting.
Well, I want to get to the bottom of the fact that the discussion about materials, where that is one of the three keen factors in the policy C7.
So you could possibly ask the question, have you discussed materials with the officers?
I think we've tried, and the application, this application's been in for almost 12 months, the previous one for a few months before that. Sadly, we haven't had any discussions, although we've wanted to. So we're very amenable to changing materials. We always have been. We've always said that. But because we've had no dialogue. We don't really know what the planning officers would accept and would advise.
Okay, thank you. That's your side of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't have questions from any. I've no other blue hands. No one's waving at me. Okay, Mr. Jones, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. We have no other questions of you. Thank you. Can we now invite I think we've got of the 3 ward members, I think 2 of them wish to speak. Could we possibly invite those in, please, councillors James Cole and Claire Rolls?
They should have joined as chairman. They just need to start their camera.
Right, indeed. Good evening, Claire.
Evening, Chairman.
Evening, James.
Good,
Now,
good evening, Chairman.
You have 5 minutes between you. Who's going first?
I am, Chairman.
Okay. Do you want a notification after 2.5 minutes or minutes or what?
I think we're good, actually.
Okay, but if I could ask, where was she, Jenny? Could you put the clock on, please, and let me know when 4 minutes is up, please.
Yes, Chairman, will do.
Okay, thank you. Claire, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to start by thanking the officers for rescheduling this application to accommodate the fact that Mr. Jones was rowing the Atlantic in January for charity. Members, before James Cole and I first visited Quill Cottage, we shared the same concerns as officers. On paper, it appeared to be a typical case of overdevelopment in the AONB, contrary to policy C7. It was only after a site inspection that our view of this application significantly changed. This application has been before Western Area twice, and as such, been thoroughly scrutinised, with members recommending approval after rigorous examination of all aspects of policy, particularly C7. Much time and attention is focused on measurements, and officers have accepted that there have been some errors made, but all parties are now in broadly agreement. This is about proportionality and impact. In reality, the scheme will significantly enhance the local area by effectively replacing a very drab 1970 bungalow with a house much more in keeping with other neighbouring properties. As you'll have seen from the photos, they are all 2-storey houses. There are a few specific points I'd like to address in the officers' report before handing over to Councillor Cole. Firstly, with a proposed height increase amounting to 2.5 metres, I fail to see how a new dwelling would be overly visible from the public right-of-way. Even by officers' own admission, the property is well screened at present by high, mature vegetation within the site boundary. Secondly, officers seek to rely on the Inglewood Farm Cottage appeal, which has no relevance to this application. This appeal case was not a bungalow and relates to a small extension to an already approved application to demolish and replace an existing 2-storey house in a remote part of Kimpbury where the immediate neighbours are sheep. Thirdly, regarding materials, the applicant has followed their interpretation of the ink pen design statement, and I understand there are 5 properties within a mile of Quill Cottage that are brick and flint. And as you've heard from the applicant, they are open to views and we would be willing to change these materials, but they've had no engagement from officers. The officer also states dormer windows do not form part of the street scene, and yet when this application was last heard, Councillor Williston confirmed that he encountered 6 within half a mile of the development. James.
Thank you, Claire. Sizes are difficult. In September 2020, our planners approved Fishery Cottage, where the Parish Council, Hampstead Marshall, objected. It was a 45% increase in footprint, yet it was stated to be not disproportionate to the original. In the same delegated report, the planning officer stated, any proposal for a replacement dwelling which more than doubles the original dwelling would normally be regarded as disproportionate, as it would be more visually dominant than the original. In other words, to him, over 100% would have been unacceptable. And yet, the new building there will be 8.1 metres high and within full view of 2 footpaths and on the river. Here, including the garage, we're talking about a 21% increase in footprint, 61% increase in volume, which for adding a second floor is a very small set of increases. It's been well designed. And it is in an area of 2-storey houses, so the 7.6 metres height proposed, that 49% increase, is in no way out of line. For the parish, yes, the parish, as you've learned, did object to the first version, but the parish has changed its view. And of those 7 parish councillors, our website shows that 4 of the 7 are in favour of this application. They're on the website. Also, you've heard that objection from the CPRE with the Lord Lieutenant's name quoted. I can confirm that he knows nothing of this subject. I checked. And I can also confirm that the local CPRE person is also the clerk to the parish council.
4 minutes, Chairman.
Thank you.
I moved on this application from being happy to tell the applicant that he was not going to get his application passed, to going through the difficulties of the measurements and eventually concluding this was actually within policy, which is why we asked Western Area to approve it. I still believe that the existing is a poor quality building that needs to be replaced. The proposed replacement is not disproportionate. The environmental aspects are very good. The locals want it. And when you look at the question of it looks, what it will look like, there's loads of flint roundabout. I have flint panels in my yard walls a couple of miles away. I personally would leave the flint in, but if members don't like it, the applicant has always been happy to take it out if need be, and there's been no attempt to discuss this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. 5 seconds to go. Well done. Well done, the Pervy. Thank you. Okay, members, do we have any questions of our 2 ward members? I don't see any. Oh, no. None at all. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there was something come up just as I was clicking back. Yes, Councillor McKinnon.
Sorry, Chairman, you almost got away with that one there. I've got a question for Councillor Cole, James Cole. Hi, James. Just on the question of proportionality, so the increase in the footprint, I'm just looking at paragraph 2.3 of our reports here tonight. That's on page 19 of our pack, where the officers say that the proposal would represent an increase in floor space of approximately 113% of the gross external floor area of the dwelling.
I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, well, that was my question. Just it seems a bit inconsistent with your comments, but what do you make of that?
Well, the table that I've got in front of me, I worked it on the...
Which one's that, James? The one you've got in front of you, because...
Page 20.
Go back to my...
Page 20, 2.7, updated measurements table.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay.
Footprint. Existing with garage, existing without, proposed with, proposed without. Yeah?
I think they're referring to total floor area, James. The 130.
They said footprint.
The paragraph 2.3 says external floor area.
It says external floor area, not footprint.
The first line says footprint. And footprint was what I quoted.
Well, okay, well, fine.
If you're looking at the...
Oh, the first line the first line on the table's footprint, you say, yeah?
Yeah.
Understand that, but where Councillor McKinnon was asking from 2.3 was external area, which is total floor area. And that table says total floor area. It went from existing without garage, which is 149.1 to 318.5. And that's, I calculated that at 113%.
If you put one floor on top of another, you are going to double the total floor area. End of story. Exactly. No one could possibly argue about that. We aren't arguing that. Wouldn't pretend to.
Okay.
What we are arguing is impact. This is a policy, and our problem is whether or not this impacts the village, the street scene, whether the impact compares to the nearby houses. And if you look at the space the building would take if it were permitted, you've got to look at footprint, the first thing. You've got to look at height, and you've got to look at volume.
Yeah.
So those are the three basic things.
Yeah, we get that, James, all of those.
That's what I was comparing.
It's what determines proportionality. Councillor McKinnon, have your question been answered?
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Cole. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. No, you're absolutely right, members. It's got to be, James is correct, and we can get into an awful lot of detail about 110%, 113%, whether it's footprint, whether it's volume. All of those got to be taken into account when you're determining proportionality, and that's what I think we're just about to sit down and do. Any other questions of the ward members? No. Okay. Well, thank you for attending, and thank you for presenting.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks for listening to us.
4 minutes, 55 seconds. Thank you. Now, I'd like to, before we get into debate, can I invite questions, please, of clarification of the officers? I'm looking for the blue hands. Okay, a few of them coming up. First one is Councillor Cole, and the second one I've got is Councillor Pask. Hilary.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really just a question of clarification or confirmation from Mr. Till. Both the applicant and the ward members have said there's been no engagement between the applicant and officers. Is that the case? And a supplementary question, if I may, is did the applicant pay for pre-planning application advice as they are able to, the applicant or their agent?
That's good. Two good questions. Thank you. Simon?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cole, as I understand it, the previous application was withdrawn in part because of officers' advice regarding the acceptability of that scheme. Officers have made the applicant aware of their concerns in respect of the proposals. This application has been with us as the applicant raised for some time, and if the applicant or their agent had alternative proposals to make to officers, they needed only to put those alternative proposals in writing for officers to comment on. You've mentioned pre-application advice, and I believe that there wasn't a pre-application on this set of applications. I'm not aware able to comment on the specific level of dialogue between the applicant and officers. Suffice to say that the applicant was made aware of officers' concerns, and yet, as far as I can see from the public documents on the file, has not sought to amend the proposals in the manner that might address, or a manner that might address the officers' concerns. And the issue of materials is one of those areas where the applicant might have put proposals for alternative materials in consultation with their agent in front of officers, but hasn't chosen to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, yes, thank you. I don't wish to go into this much more as to, I don't want to who said what to who, when or not, because it really isn't relevant to what we decide tonight. We're deciding on an application on a property that goes with the site, not with the applicant, not with anything else other than with the site. And that, I suspect, if there was any miscommunications, that's for another day and perhaps a different judicial body to decide. I've got Councillor Pask and then Councillor Vickers. Councillor Pask.
Chairman, thank you. A very site-specific question, you'll be relieved to hear. I listened with very, very closely to Mr. Till when he described the red line and the garden area. Could I please just ask, in that, in the agenda, the red line is in line with the back of the next door property and is not the same as you showed us, Mr. Till. Is the map that you showed us, sorry, do forgive me, is the map that you showed us a result of the certificate of lawfulness shown on page 28 in the planning history of this application on the agenda, please? And what is the blue line that is also in the ownership of the applicant?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Pask. The map that I showed you, which I'll display by sharing my screen again, is a map that was submitted in 2005 with an application for extension of the dwelling. It does correspond with the map for the 1990s certificate of lawfulness application. The reason I haven't referred to that particular document is that the plan is somewhat poor quality by comparison to this one. This one is considerably more clear in showing the site and its constraints. In terms of the location plan submitted with the current application, members will note that the rectangular section that was on the rear of that garden space behind Quill Cottage has been omitted, but it is included within the blue line of land within the applicant's ownership. In this particular case, the matter isn't prejudicial to the determination of this particular application, and what the applicant has done is effectively reduced his available garden space. A pragmatic approach to addressing this would be to apply an informative simply to state that the residential curtilage isn't accepted as being correct and referring to the previous certificate of lawfulness.
Happy with the answer. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Could we go back to full screen, please? Thank you. I've got Councillor Vickers. Tony, do you have a question?
Yes, my question is following up on Councillor McKinnon's recent question, because although I'm a chartered surveyor and I know about measuring things, I don't understand what gross external floor area is, or if it's what I think it is, how come you can get 113% increase unless you're counting the first floor and adding it to the ground floor, as Councillor Cole said. So can you explain what the relevance is for our deliberations of that figure in para 2.3?
Thank you, Chairman. The gross external area is gross external floor area is indeed the floor area of both the ground and first floor. Clearly, as the current building doesn't have a first floor, it doesn't have a first floor to act as a consideration, but that is how that figure is derived. And the Councillor McKinnon correctly noted that the increase in footprint would be a different figure. And I believe that increase in footprint is about 21%. But where we're evaluating these figures, it's important that the full figures are provided, not just limiting to footprint.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a supplementary? Because I mean,
go ahead.
Policy says that when looking at proportionality, the significant things are massing, height, and layouts, and not gross external floor area. Am I right?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Vickers, I would quite agree with that. The table has been included for completeness of information because it's a question that members very often have when asking these questions. But as I've referred to, the inspector's decision on Inglewood Cottage refers back to the policy quite clearly on the matters that you've raised.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just check if we have any other members wishing to ask questions of clarification of the officers. No, I haven't. Okay, so that's the first part of the meeting over. We now go into debate. So if someone wishes to open the debate, I would be very happy to let them go. I've got Councillor Macro with his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree that this is an incredible increase in size, really. It's going to have quite a dramatic effect on the neighbourhood and on the AUNB. So I think officers are right when they say this is a disproportionate increase in size, and it will have that impact. However, I'm rather concerned about the issues regarding materials. I took a virtual drive down Craven Road on using Google's Street Map, and there's a large number of buildings of various designs and various materials. There were several with dormers. There was one with eyebrow dormers, and others with more conventional dormers. The pub has a dormer. When it came to materials, all kinds of materials, including one building which seemed to be built either of clad, I should say, and either light grey or light blue wood. So I have great difficulty in being able to say you shouldn't have flint, you shouldn't have light grey window surrounds and light grey window goods, rainwater goods, sorry, because you know there's all kinds of materials all through the area. So I would like to. I'm supporting the officer's recommendations, and as far as the disproportionate increase in sizes are concerned, but not as far as the materials are concerned.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. I've now got next on the line is Councillor Hooker. Clive. You need to unmute, Clive.
Sorry, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. If I was the applicant and my architect presented me with these drawings and elevations and the internal layout, I would be absolutely delighted. I may have asked maybe for a couple more of ensuite bathrooms, but that's about it. And no doubt the architect has designed this to the applicant's specification. But when one has the opportunity to design and build the home of your dreams, you have to take on, which Mr. and Mrs. Jones have done, and they really have made the most of it. But one has to be conscious if you buy a site in a rural village in the AONB with a dark skies policy, one has to be sympathetic to those parameters. And this is where our policies must be taken into consideration. As we know in our DPD policy C7, it clearly states the replacement building is proportionate in size and scale to the existing dwelling, the individual heritage and setting, the setting in the wider landscape, all issues that we've heard of this evening. But it also states at 4.7 in that policy that the policy that there is evidence within the OMB of small rural properties being purchased, then demolished and replaced with substantial new houses. These are often alienate the local context and the special qualities and natural beauty of the landscape of the AONB. Such developments neither enhance nor conserve the character of the AONB and will be resisted. And he says resisted, but it's something. 4.58 goes on to say, if a replacement dwelling is disproportionate, it will not be accepted. And this committee invariably works and got to work within our policy setup. So regarding the issue of proportionality, this, as we know, is subjective, and one of the matters that this committee will consider tonight with regard to coming to a resolution. But what have we got here? We've got a replacement 3-bedroom bungalow with a double fronted 4-bedroom 2-story house, whose ridge height, from my calculations, is about 2.4 meters higher, 7 feet higher than the bungalow that's in position at the moment. In my opinion, this is not proportionate. Regarding the other conditions of the policies, the impact of the existing bungalow on both Craven Road and the public rights of way in Pen 5.1, which comes out, incidentally, right opposite onto Craven Road, right opposite Quill Cottage. Currently, it's negligible due to the low profile of the roof, but the proposed house changes that considerably from the aspect of Craven Road and from the public right of way 15.1. due to its disproportionate size and scale, in particular, as I said, to the 2.4 height increase and the width of the double gable ends on the front elevation. The inclusion also of a considerable amount of glazing will contradict the Inkpen village design statement, which supports a dark skies policy. Going on then, I would say that having a look at the previous application for this site, this is the one that went in March 2020, but was withdrawn. I do feel that this application has not been helped in the fact that the applicant has been stated by Mr. Till, the curtilage has been made smaller, which effectively makes this look as if we got an even larger size house on a smaller plot. I'll reserve my opinion. I'll listen to the other members' opinions and as the debate goes on, and I'll make my decision later on this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll be brief. I think the photographs which stood out for me there was two. There was one from the public right of way, just over the little wooden gate, which showed the roof of the existing property just peeking out over the top of a hedge. And from that photograph, you could see, obviously, when you consider the extra height that's going to be added onto the property, that, to me, that would have a very significant impact on the scale of the property from that public right of way. The other photograph, which I found quite striking, was the computer modelled simulation of what the new property would look like compared to the old. I mean, proportionate was not a word which sprang to mind when I looked at either of those photographs. There's a few arguments that have been put forward from supporters that I don't think we should have much time for. The one that says, well, it's a rundown bungalow at the moment, there might be a worse application in the future, we're redoing an eyesore. Well, with respect, you can redevelop an eyesore without making it bigger, can't you? It's not really a justification for the increase in scale. I sympathise with the applicant, as Councillor Hooker says. I'd be very keen on this as well. The fact that, again, it's been alluded to in some of the supporter submissions that the applicant does a lot of good work for the community, that's great, and more power to his elbow, but it's not relevant to a planning application, really. Yeah, so we'll like Councillor Hooker, I'll listen to the other members, but proportionate is not a word that springs to mind when I look at these photographs.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Pask and Vickers and Bonnet. Councillor Pask.
Chairman, thank you. I applaud the design of this house. I think it's designed beautifully. I would love to live in it in the right location. And I fear that in the open countryside in the AONB, sadly, the right location. I do agree and understand that the existing 70s bungalow is hardly of any architectural merit whatsoever. That doesn't make it uninhabitable. It doesn't make it that one could do something with that or even replace it with something that is more proportionate. Chairman, we have to, over many years I've learned, we have to judge each application on its merit. But in our pack, we have two appeal decisions, one starting on page 41 and one on 45. One is in Leckhampstead and one is in Yattendon. And interestingly, they are both about policy C7. And then coincidentally, I'm sure, in paragraph 10 on both of them, just over the pages on pages 42 and 46, the planning inspector comments on proportionality. And I have to say, despite my kind words of design, and personally I don't object to the flint, but let's not go down that hole. My personal view is, sadly, that this is disproportionate in this location. I'm leaning at the moment, unless someone comes up with a very powerful argument to convince me otherwise, of concurring with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, I'm going to be looking for proposals soon for people, but first of all, I've got Councillor Vickers and then Councillor Bonnet. Tony.
Chairman, colleagues, there is a difference, I think, between the policy itself and the supporting text. And to me, in the policy itself, there are two key words. One is the little word and the other is the word adverse. If I can just read this and then say a bit more about why I am quite happy to propose that we do not support officers' recommendations and that we accept, we allow this to go through. The replacement dwelling must be proportionate in size and scale to the existing dwelling, uses appropriate materials, and does not have an adverse impact on the character, local distinctiveness of the rural area, the individual heritage assets and their settings, and its setting within the wider landscape. So it has to be both proportionate and have appropriate materials and not have an adverse impact. All three, not one, not two, but all three. So taking all three. Let's accept that it's not proportionate. Okay, doesn't tick that box. But actually to go on from that, in the supporting text, to guide us as to what is proportionate, we have to look at a particular location, the impact of a particular property in a particular location. Now, I walked past that before the July meeting. I wasn't at the October meeting. I don't believe it will be unduly disproportionate in that particular location as somebody who uses rights of way. So proportionate, maybe, maybe not. Appropriate materials, well, we've heard that the applicant and the officers have not managed to discuss that, but we've also seen in writing that the applicant is perfectly happy to discuss changes of material. Now, adverse impact. As I say, I've walked the area and I don't believe it has an adverse impact. We've heard from somebody who is a parish councillor and knows the people who live there, and we've heard from Councillor McCrow that it doesn't appear to be particularly adverse impact. I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact. Yes, it has an impact. I think it has a beneficial impact, actually, because what outstanding beauty does the existing property add to the AONB? Well, absolutely none. So, you know, nobody that matters, or almost nobody that matters in Impen, I think will be sad to see the existing property go and to be replaced by the one that we're looking at.
Okay.
So that's my position, and I propose that we accept that accept the application.
Before we make a formal proposal, could we hear Councillor Barnett, please, and Councillor Cole?
Chairman, I was hoping to follow up with Councillor Vickers after a proposal, but obviously not at this stage. Can I make a few observations, Chairman? I mean, I was expecting some of the comments tonight from other members to be totally of a very negative form, and I'm quite encouraged that some of the views are very much in the middle of the road, in very much tippling either way, in favour or against this application. I've actually looked at it in a constructive way myself, and like Councillor Vickers, I've had the pleasure of actually being along that road even today again, albeit it was obviously a difficult area, so much ice around. One has to be a bit careful. But having said that, I honestly feel that, you know, that the comments have been made by the both the proposal, the parish council, and obviously the way that the developer or the applicant is considering it is a very constructive way, and I do feel that, yes, recognizing it, you know, it is a quite a large property, and also obviously in the AONB, it's not going to be totally out of step with some of the other properties along Craven Road and the area sprawled about the spreaded village of Inkpen. But, you know, having said that, you know, we are looking at an application which, yes, is going to be a replacement for a property which one might think could well be completely run down. But you know, we've also got to look at the applicant's needs and what would be you know, a suitable replacement. And you know, I have to say, I'm, you know, looking at it totally different than I looked at it both on the western area when it was deferred, and also the one that was proposed to go through, and obviously it deferred to the comments of the district committee. So therefore, if Councillor Vickers was preparing himself to put
Yep.
forward this motion,
We hear you.
I would be more than happy to second.
Okay, just before I do that officially, let me hear Councillor Cole, please. Hilary.
Thank you, Chairman. I do understand the applicant's desire to replace this bungalow with the home of their dreams, as Councillor Pask has mentioned. However, and I have driven along Craven Road, and I do accept that it is there's a variety of dwellings on that stretch of road. You can't say that there is a particular pattern or design on Craven Road. It's a disparate selection of dwellings, some of which are attractive and some of which are less attractive. However, Councillor Hooker, in my view, hit the nail on the head when he quoted 4.7 of policy C7. I noticed Councillor Vickers has given us the headlines, but he didn't seem to want to pay attention to 4.7, which it was specifically included at members' request when the document was put together, which is about small rural properties being purchased, demolished and replaced with substantial new houses, which is exactly the point of this particular application. I think we've also got to take into account policy C3, which is with regard to design. I know that the applicants are now saying that they are willing to discuss with us the materials used, but surely they could have discussed this with pre-planning application advice prior to this application coming before, not just before us tonight, but before Western Area Planning Committee. And I think that is something that should be borne in mind. And I don't think it's our authority, our intention as an authority to be over prescriptive in the guidance we offer with regard to good design. And that is encapsulated in paragraph 4.25 of policy C3. But I do think we have to bear in mind the character and appearance in this particular part of Inkpen, because the site itself is elevated, and that will also automatically mean a two-storey building looks far bigger than it would do if it was on a level on a lower level. So my view is that I do support officer recommendation, and I don't know that a proposal has been made.
No, we haven't made one yet, and
So
to be.
I would like to propose that we accept officer recommendation.
Well, I hear you, Councillor Cole. With due respect, I did push back on Councillor Vickers because I wanted to give all the officers, all the members, an opportunity. And I've just had Councillor Caroline Culver's hand up as well now. I'd like to give her the opportunity to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Except I was a bit late to put my hand up there. I agree with many of the other comments that the members have made with regard to the proportion. Having looked on the Google Maps, there are houses of a lot of different designs down that road. So I think the argument that it should be in keeping with everything else is very weak, because there is no standard style down that road. I think the environmental intentions are very good, but I also think that looking at the proposed design, there are, I think, 3 seating areas downstairs, plus a kitchen, plus what I assume is a study area. And I don't really think that that is necessary. I can understand the applicant wanting to have bigger bedrooms, but to have that much floor space downstairs and thereby inflate the size of the property, I don't think is necessary. And as we've discussed at previous planning meetings, we do need to have more smaller properties. I think we've got a surfeit of 4 and 5 bedroom properties. It is possible to refurbish a bungalow and you know, that kind of bungalow, and make it very, very nice indeed. So I think that would be an option open to the applicant. And also with regards to this disproportionate issue, which has arisen at previous meetings, we've got the technology now, we've got AutoCAD and stuff like that. I wonder whether in future, as well as the photographs and the 2D diagrams, whether we could have some sort of 3D presentation from various angles, which would give us more of a sense of the kind of impact of these proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's a good idea. I think we're constrained, however, by national regulations as to what can and cannot be submitted, but we should look at that as perhaps in PIG. And as you're a member of PIG, maybe you could bring that up sometime, Councillor, on that. Now, look, I got a feeling as how this is going, but the person who jumped in wishing to make a proposal first was Councillor Vickers. So I feel obliged to go back to Councillor Vickers. Do you?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. You just said, actually, you know, you were looking for somebody to make a proposal, so I thought I was in your favour. But then you,
yeah, you did get in.
Everybody have a chance to speak. Well,
I'm going back to you.
I would like to put my proposal. I don't know whether, I think there were some sort of roughed out conditions in the papers somewhere. Officers might have anticipated that it might be subject to a proposal to go the other way to what they wanted, but
it was to do with the drawings and the Kirtleys. There was a condition that
all right,
the officers wished to add it if we were going to approve.
Well, normally at this point, if I'm proposing something that's going to be approving an application, I'm asked to suggest some conditions. Am I?
I believe there's something on page 59, sorry, 59.
Yeah, I thought I'd seen something. I'll go with what's there for the time being.
We'll go with what's there and leave it to, if we approve it, leave it to the officers to.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a big if from what the sense I'm getting, but
okay, okay. So you're proposing accepting the approving the application. Does that have a seconder?
It does, Chairman.
Councillor Boylan has got a seconder. Okay. Just before we go to the vote, I would like an opportunity to say one or two things. As far as I'm concerned here, there's a lot of this arguments about proportionality, and I'm not sure, Councillor Vickers, I agree with your interpretation of the two ands, because you know, in one extreme, when we look at footprint, for example, we have the same footprint as a small bungalow, but we could have a 20-story building on top of it. So it's more than just footprint and one or two people making that point. So in my opinion, if we decide it's proportionate, it's probably it gets over the hurdle that you're looking for. If we decide it's not proportionate, it's out of proportion, then I think we've got to look and say, are there any exceptions here? If it's not proportionate, it's out of policy. And if it's out of policy, we can only accept it if there are exceptions. I'm not going to spoon feed you. You've got to make your own minds up as to whether you see exceptions or not, and then relate them, because we don't want this set as a precedent of any kind. So I've got a properly proposed and formulated proposal to accept the application with the conditions as on page, whatever the page was, and it's been properly seconded. Could you, Sharon, take us through that vote, please?
Okay, so Councillor Barnett.
Sorry, for the proposal.
Councillor Beck. Sorry, you're muted, Councillor Beck.
For the proposal.
For approval. Councillor Cole.
Against.
Councillor Culver.
Against.
Councillor Hooker.
Against.
Councillor Longton. Sorry, you're muted. You're still muted.
Right, yeah.
I'm for allowing the proposal.
You're for it, sorry. I didn't
For
quite catch
allowing
that.
the proposal.
For it. Okay,
Yes.
Councillor McKinnon.
Against.
Councillor Macro.
Against.
Councillor Pask.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Law.
I will abstain on this one, but I think the proposal has been turned down.
It has been, so we need another proposal.
We need a proposal. Shall I turn to Councillor Cole?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I propose that we accept officer recommendation and refuse this application.
Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to second that, please.
Seconder, can I ask a question on this? Because there was a feeling throughout that perhaps it was not proportionate, but perhaps the refusal on materials was not strong. So could I ask both the proposer and the seconder, do you wish to continue with both refusals, both reasons for refusal? Councillor Cole.
I think we've got to, yes, I would say so, because I think materials is a consideration, Chairman.
Okay, fine. So that's fine. And you're happy with that, Councillor Hooker?
I am.
Fine. Okay. Okay. So we have a proposal to accept officers' recommendations.
Chairman,
So-
Councillor Macro's got his hand.
I would like to propose an amendment
Well-
to remove the refusal reasons for materials, and particularly for dormer windows.
Sharon, you're going to have to guide me. Can we do?
Yes, so what will have to happen is if the proposer and the seconder don't agree, we'll have to go with the proposal we've got. And if that fails, there'll have to be a subsequent proposal.
Okay. So we can't put that amendment in just yet, Alan.
Oh, right, okay.
You've got to make your mind up which is the least of the two the options you've got here. You can either accept or vote against. So can we go to the vote on that proposal, please, Sharon?
Okay, so this is for refusal. Councillor Barnett.
Against.
Councillor Beck.
Against.
Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Culver.
For.
Councillor Hooker.
For.
Councillor Longton.
You need to unmute again, Councillor.
Against.
Councillor McKinnon.
For.
Councillor Macro.
For.
Councillor Pask.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
Against.
Councillor Law.
For.
Okay, so that proposal is passed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members. That was a good debate. I think it was a fair debate. All the points were covered, and I thank you very much indeed. I don't think there's anything else we have to cover. So thank you for spending an hour and what was it? Oh, yeah, an hour and 35 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Good night to you all.